Of course I like him.
No, I mean you like him. Like you.
He actually said officially. That's the sweetest thing I ever heard.
Oh. That's careful. I was good to her.
Yes, ma'am, I am.
Tell me one thing. Is he good in bed? Now you know we wouldn't be talking if he weren't.
A Journal for Jordan is a movie based on a true story. Directed by Denzel Washington, the movie takes you on an emotional journey of love, compassion, integrity, and loss. In today's fast-paced world of quick romances, the slow pace of the movie is refreshing, allowing us to experience the emotional punch that this movie brings. We follow the lives of Dana Candy and Charles King as they find their way to each other and their son Jordan. The movie plays out at different timelines, shifting from the present day to the past. The movie begins with Dana dreaming about snippets of her life with Charles, waking up to the memory of his death. She is alone in her home with a baby. It is the year 2007, and Dana works as a journalist for the New York Times. She gets into the office and is intercepted by her boss, who wants to add another reporter to help her with her story. Her boss is worried that another newspaper will steal the story from them. Immediately we see the irritation and disbelief at this suggestion. She thinks that just because the other guy is a white male, a name drop was enough to get him into the story, while she had to work twice as hard to earn the same privileges. The racism is apparent and reflected in the way that Dana is treated at work. She is furious at her boss for adding another reporter to her story and is trying to get her boss's attention. Her boss turns around and indicates her blouse, which is wet because her breasts are leaking milk. She consciously pulls her jacket to cover the wetness and heads to her office. Her friend and colleague Miriam walks into her office while she is using the breast pump. Miriam is concerned for her and begs her not to isolate herself. We get the impression that the incident of Charles's passing took place not too long ago, and Dana is trying to cope with it the best way she can. And as usual, everyone thinks their way to cope is the best way, without actually listening to what the other person needs. Miriam is trying to help but respectfully does not push Dana too much and is there for her. She gets home to her son, who is being looked after by a nanny. She walks into his room and checks his forehead just to be sure he isn't coming down with something. Dana is exhausted, still grieving for the loss of Charles, when Jordan begins wailing. She calms him down and gets into bed, only to be woken up by a dream/nightmare of Charles whispering in her ear, telling her to tell him everything. She walks up to her closet, removing a box filled with memories of Charles, along with a book titled A Father's Legacy, printed in beautiful gold lettering. She walks into Jordan's room and begins to read to him from the book. She reads, "Dear Jordan, I want you to know that it's all right for boys to cry. Sometimes crying can release a lot of pain and stress. It has nothing to do with your manhood." The book that Dana is reading is a journal that Charles wrote for Jordan. It is a book filled with words and wisdom that Charles wanted his son to know but never got the opportunity to teach him himself. Dana sits down at her laptop and begins writing a letter to her son Jordan about his father and about them. She recalls the first time she ever saw Charles Monroe King. It is the year 1998, and she is visiting her father for his birthday. Immediately we see a very different Dana from the one we've been seeing so far. She is happy, full of life, coasting in her car and singing along to pop tunes as she makes her way to her childhood home. At dinner, her mother asks the usual mom questions. She tells her mother that she broke up with her current boyfriend and that they are never getting back together. Dana, her two siblings, and her parents sit down for a family dinner. The family says grace at the table and begins eating. Post-dinner, she catches her siblings smoking by the shed, and she chastises them. They want her to take a hit so she can relax. Dana is a type of personality and cannot stay with her parents anymore. She is staying at a hotel close to her parents' house. We also find that there is some tension between her mother and father, and Dana disapproves of her mother continuing to stay with him. We don't know what the issue is, but we will find out later. The next morning, she walks into her parents' house to find a stranger hanging up a framed painting. He asks her if she is Dana or Gwen, showing he has intimate knowledge of the family. He introduces himself as First Sergeant Charles King. Her father was his drill sergeant and is very close to the family. The painting he is hanging up is a painting of the 761st Tank Battalion. She identifies the style of drawing and is fascinated that he could draw so well. She excuses herself from the conversation to see her father chilling in the backyard. She hands him a box of cigars as his birthday present, asking him to hide it from her mom. Her dad seems intent on setting the two of them together, pointing out that he is talented and good-looking. Her father is giving her tips on how to get together with Charles, a sweet and fun moment of father-daughter bonding. She decides to take her father's advice and tells Charles that she forgot her phone at the hotel, asking him to give her a ride. She turns on the music system, and an old song begins to play. She is trying to get him to open up, but he remains quiet for the most part. She asks him about the shared history of Charles and her father. He tells her he was lucky to meet them because they were there for him. They stop at a signal, and when the signal turns green, the car ahead of them does not move. Charles is patient. He is not bothered that the car ahead of him is not moving, while we see Dana getting impatient. She cannot take the wait any longer and honks rudely. She justifies her reasoning by saying she is a city girl and will always be. He finds this adorable, sneaking glances at her constantly. A little while later, the two of them are sharing a can of soda, sitting with their legs dipped in the hotel pool. She asks him about his relationship with her parents. He tells her that he is going through a divorce and that her parents are there for him. Her mom is a good listener, and her dad calls him over for a game every now and again. He loves them like his own parents, so much so that he calls her father Pops. She is surprised because it's not the same experience she had growing up with them as parents. He slides in closer to her and asks her if she is seeing anyone. She tells him she is recently single. Excited, he offers to pick her up for the BBQ party the next day since her car is at her parents' place. The next day, Dana is fast asleep and is woken up by a knock she thinks is housekeeping. It's actually Charles, and she has overslept. She gets ready in a hurry, and he compliments her. They head to a diner to grab breakfast. They talk about their histories, exchanging stories when the waitress comes over with their order. Their eating habits are diverse as well. She orders waffles and hash browns while he orders oatmeal. The waitress is blatantly flirting with him, and Dana does not like it. She grabs the waitress's attention and asks for a warm-up of coffee and some hot sauce. Charles is amused by this interaction, but being the gentleman that he is, he does not say a word. The waitress leaves their table, and Dana is back to asking him questions about his life when he excuses himself for a few minutes to say grace. He tells her he plans to spend another 9 years in the army and then focus on his art. She has a little bit of hot sauce across the side of her lips, and he offers to remove it for her. It is slightly awkward as he leans in to wipe the smudge off her face. She quickly dismisses the awkwardness by talking about Monet's work hanging in the Met Museum. He says he has never been to New York, and she invites him to come up and see Monet's painting in person. The BBQ party is uneventful, with the two sneaking glances at each other. She wants him to stay longer, enticing him with fresh apple pie. He is tempted but has a phone date with his daughter, which is more important. She is slightly taken aback by the fact that he has a daughter. Taking it in stride, she asks him to look her up if he ever finds himself in New York. He kisses her on the cheek and excuses himself from the party. 3 weeks later, she gets a call from him. Initially, she teases him for taking so long to call, and he tells her that he needs time because his divorce just got finalized. He tells her he's been thinking about her a lot. It is now 2009, and Jordan has turned 2. Mom and son have an amazing time playing around the living room. Dana is slowly starting to experience her life, with joy once again being part of it. Jordan sees a set of red balloons flying in the air and shouts, "Peekaboo." She doesn't understand and finally realizes that Jordan probably remembered his father playing peekaboo with him. Dana is reminded of those days, and she removes a music CD that Charles had given her, as well as the photo of Charles with the red balloons. We are taken back to the past, to the initial phase of the relationship where they get to know each other. They have regular phone calls as they discuss each other's lives. They talk about the racism she feels in her office and his experiences in Iraq and Kuwait. They go back to being teenagers with each other playing the hang-up game. No, you hang up. No, you. It is cute, it is sweet, and it melts your heart to see two adults being so comfortable with each other that they can be moronically silly. They talk about their aspirations for more children and his daughter. He talks to her about how the divorce was stressful for his daughter. He admits feeling like a failure because he tried to make the marriage work, but it did not. He accepts responsibility and takes ownership of his actions. There is genuine affection in this scene even though they are miles away from each other. They care about each other's lives. She is sorry that he had to go through that, and her empathy towards him just goes on to strengthen this connection further. He is grateful for the things that have happened in his life because it made him a better person that led him to her. She tells him about her father's propensity for cheating. He would often go out after dinner, excusing himself to buy milk, but was in reality cheating on her mom. She never understood how her mom stayed with her father or never confronted him. She tells her about a time when she was sick with the flu, and her mom had to borrow the neighbor's car to take her to the hospital. She remembers being delirious in the back seat. And when she lifted her head up, she saw her mother driving around the parking lot of a bar on the base, looking for her father's car. Her father felt trapped in the relationship because her mother got pregnant, but her mother was just as trapped as he was. He asks her how that made her feel, but she suddenly gets conscious that she has revealed too much to him. She tries to brush it away with a joke, but he tells her it's too late to hide because he is already all in. She changes subjects by asking him what he does in his free time, and he says he likes to go to the gym. They joke about her not being a gym person, but he does not in any way ask her to try working out because he accepts her just the way she is. The scene shifts to Dana hanging out with her friends at a bar, discussing Charles. Charles. We see Dana having some inhibitions because her father was a soldier too, and in some ways thinks that he, too, might cheat on her. She points out that he is divorced and has a daughter. At this point, she is likely afraid of the connection they have and is looking for excuses to cut him out. Dana is getting ready for work on a Friday, and it is the day he is coming to visit her. She is nervous and slightly afraid that he might not like her city. He offers to stay at a hotel, but she doesn't want him to. She gives him instructions on how to get here, as well as how much the cab ride should cost him. He appeases her by saying that if he could survive a battle in Iraq, he should be able to navigate the city of New York. He takes it one step further by asking her to call his mom if he does not make it to New York. He is excited to meet her and shows this by being absolutely adorably corny. Guess what? What? Chicken butt. She calls him out on his corniness and hangs up the phone. Later in the day, he reaches her place, and her doorman Manny lets him into her apartment. She is apologetic because she has to work for a few more hours, but he is fine with his sketch pad and asks her to take her time. She also asks Manny to help him out if he needs anything. After hanging up, her friend asks her to ditch work and get home to meet her man. She gets home, and they greet each other by asking about their day and trip. They set boundaries by discussing sleeping arrangements and each other's expectations. The two of them go out for a fancy dinner at one of NYC's upscale restaurants, and while he is not impressed, he is not uncomfortable either. The waiter walks over to their table to take their order. She orders for herself while he orders only a Caesar salad for himself. She urges him to try out their pasta, to which he comments that pasta has too many carbs. She cajoles him to eat something else apart from a Caesar salad, and instead, he questions her about how she knows what he likes to eat. He stays firm in his order. She suggests at least getting some grilled chicken in them, to which he agrees silently. This scene is beautiful because she does not force him, nor does she demand that he eat something else, having come to this fancy restaurant, while he listens to her without any pride or ego. She turns to him, telling him she wants him to have a good time here when he leans over and kisses her.
You taste like oregano.
They are walking home when he constantly tries to stay on the outside of the sidewalk, protecting her. She notices this and tells him he doesn't need to do that. He is unapologetic about it and takes his place back on the outside of the sidewalk. She realizes this is who he is and apologizes for trying to change him. The understanding and respect they have for each other pop out of this scene. In a world filled with toxicity, we need examples like this to understand what a healthy relationship looks like. He kisses her again and again and again for a long time. The scene is electric, and she is enamored by his kiss. They return home to her apartment, and she goes into the bathroom to freshen up while he waits in the living room. He looks into a mirror, admitting how fine a woman she is. She comes out of the shower, opting not to shave her legs. She contemplates wearing something sexy for bed but instead dresses in her PJs. She asks him if there is anything he needs and offers one side of the bed for him to sleep in. He walks into the bedroom, wearing a tank top and boxers, looking absolutely delicious. There is a tense moment as they stare into each other's eyes, wondering what is going to happen next. Unable to stay apart, they begin kissing, turning the heat up to level 8. A few minutes later, she pulls back, not wanting to go all the way yet. He respects her choice and settles down on his side of the bed, both breathing heavily with tension. The next morning, we see Charles working out by her bed, looking ripped. She cannot keep her eyes off him, and she sees that he has already gotten her coffee. He leaves for a jog, leaving her alone to fantasize about wanting to see every inch of him. They spend time at the park, talking to each other and savoring street food. She very cleverly asks him to keep coming back. The tension is at its peak now, and they cannot keep their hands off each other. They enter the house, making out with each other, when she abruptly remembers that she has not shaved her legs. She excuses herself to the bathroom, and we see her shaving her legs frantically. I kept bracing for the cut she was going to have by shaving so quickly. She walks into the room, wearing a long t-shirt, and they pick up where they left off, making love to each other slowly and sensually throughout the night. You can feel the heat even though you can barely see anything with the lights off and blinds closed. On the last day of his visit, she takes him to the museum to look at Monet's Woman with a Parasol painting. 6 months later, we see them in a relationship, and it is Christmas time in New York. She takes him to a suiting store as a gift for Christmas. He is not too fond of the clothes she picks out, mostly because of how much it costs. He sullenly agrees but demands to pay for half. At the Christmas party, before her guests arrive, he asks her to be her girlfriend. She is uncomfortable with labeling their relationship, but he wants her to know that he is committed to her. She postpones the question until after the party. At the party, she is chilling with her friends while one of her friends, Judy, constantly warns him about hurting Dana. After the party, Charles asks her about her answer to the earlier question, and Dana tells him that she is worried that a commitment would mean leaving NYC and giving up her career, probably because that's what happened in previous relationships. He assures her that he does not expect her to move. He promises to make it work, and she cannot understand how he could be so sure about it. He tells her that no one can predict the future, but he is sure he wants a future with her. That's when she finally tells him she is already his girl and there is no one else for her apart from him. He is annoyed that she made him convince her in a light-hearted way, and she tells him she had to make him work for it. The moment is tender and filled with love. They make love passionately, kissing each other while their hands explore each other's bodies.
These days, I've been thinking about all the ways you have made your mark on the fabric, sewn into the pattern, the color and shape of my life. Chasing fear.
It's after Christmas, and he is leaving to return to base. He hands her a gift for Maddie, as well as a mix CD for her. She offers to clear out some closet space for him and asks that he leave some of his stuff at her place. The scene is symbolic of her making space in her life for him and for their future. A little later in the relationship, she calls him, telling him that she has been chosen to do an article about race in America, and they have asked her to be the editor of the piece as well. She is spiraling because this is a massive opportunity for her, and she feels like she may not be up to the task. He stops her spiraling and tells her they wouldn't have picked her if she was not up for the task. Because that's just what healthy couples do for each other. Uplift and reassure. She must fly to Akron once a week, and he offers to fly down to be with her. She lands in Akron and is unwell, but Charles has not arrived. She calls him, which goes straight to voicemail, and she leaves a message for him. She orders takeout and lights a candle for a romantic dinner, but he hasn't responded to any of her calls. He calls her after a very long time, and Charles explains that one of his soldiers had a baby, and that he was in the hospital. She's upset that he did not inform her, and he tells her that he couldn't get away to do so. Trauma from her past triggers her to think that he might have cheated on her, even though he reassures her that nothing like that happened. She is hurt and upset, and he apologizes, but he does not seem to understand how hurt she is. The argument heats up, and she hangs up on him with a goodbye. A couple of weeks later, he waits for her in her apartment, apologizing for his mistake. She is still annoyed and does not want to talk to him. He assures her that he isn't with anybody, that he is not her father, and that he would never be with another woman. He promises never to leave her, even if she wants to. He tells her he loves her and that he is not going anywhere. They kiss and are back together. The two of them are having a moment in the bedroom, where he is painting her toenails. She asks him about Iraq, and he tells her that at some point, the training kicks in, and he cannot remember anything else. She asks him if he has ever killed anyone. The answer is yes, but he does not say it out loud. 9/11 happens and they manage to reach each other, relieved that both of them are safe. He asks her to go home and stay at home. We skip forward to 2018, and Jordan is now in school. Jordan comes home from school angry and agitated. Dana asks him what is wrong, and he does not want to say anything. She finds out he is being bullied at school. Some students are calling him slurs and saying mean and hurtful things to him about his father. She hands him the journal his father wrote for him, asking him to read a page aloud. A couple of days later, Jordan tells Dana that he wants to visit his sister because his father wished for them to get to know each other, and Dana agrees. He also asks her why there aren't any photos of him in the house. Dana promises to put up some pictures. Jordan also wants to put up the folded flag, like at her father's house. Dana tells Jordan that they can't because, technically, Dana and Charles never got married. Jordan does not like this. We are taken back to the past when the US decides to send troops to Iraq. Charles is part of a battalion heading to Iraq, and he transfers to California the next day. She worries for him, but that's part of being a soldier's partner. A few days later, she is at her desk, watching footage of American tanks being blown up by an IED when she calls him. She tells him that she wants a baby, and he agrees immediately. This throws Dana off, and she asks him to think about it because she is not talking about getting a puppy. They get into an argument about how he can decide so quickly. He tells her that he had made up his mind a long time ago and asks her to marry him. She says yes, and he is ecstatic. He announces it to his team and everyone cheers for him. The scene is so downplayed that it seems very real. There is no pomp, no drama, and it's absolutely refreshing. We return to the present moment, where Jordan, Miriam, and Dana are sitting at the dining table. Jordan tells her he wants to visit his father's grave in Washington, D.C. Dana is not too keen on this, but her friend convinces her to take the trip. They are in the aircraft, on their way to D.C., when they hit turbulence, and she is afraid. Not just the turbulence, it feels like this is probably the first time she has visited his grave since the funeral. Rewind back to the past, and Dana is about 6 months pregnant when Charles comes to visit her. He is amazed by her beauty and her growing belly. At the ultrasound, they find out that the baby is a boy, making them delighted. Charles has to deploy soon, and he is making the final arrangements about money and other documents that she may require while he is deployed. He also hands her an envelope with funeral instructions already laid out. She does not want that envelope because she does not want to think of the possibility of him not coming back home. She gets up from the table and hands him the journal to write in, so that he can impart his teachings to his son for the times he is not around. Charles does not know what to write, but luckily the journal has some prompts to help get him started. The atmosphere is heavy with the prospect that Charles might not return. Even though we know that Charles dies at war, we can't help but hope that there is a twist so that Charles survives. We are back at the present moment. Dana and Jordan are on a plane to DC, and Jordan is reading some of his father's words. Jordan, always remember, your thoughts and actions must be open to change and improvement, but your convictions must be non-negotiable. So abide by your convictions, and on your journey, if you ever get down and feel like you need to talk to someone, then talk to the one who can do something about it. You can't help the tears that threaten to spill over at this poignant moment. Jordan asks his mom why his father was not there at his birth, and we are again taken back to that moment in the past. Dana is almost 8 months pregnant and can't wait for Charles to come back and be with her. But Charles tells her he cannot come right now because his men are not ready yet. If he left and one of his men died, he wouldn't be able to forgive himself. Dana is rightfully angry and upset and begs him to return, begging him to prioritize them instead of his soldiers. He refuses, and they hang up, with Dana in tears. We see Charles writing his apology in the journal. His voice blends in perfectly with the scene of Dana giving birth. He tells Jordan about the strong women in his life, that these women were his first teachers, which is why he should never disrespect or lay his hand against a woman. Brace yourselves, it's about to get teary. The scene shifts to Iraq, where the soldiers are gathered for their own type of funeral. As they call out names of the fallen heroes, they blow the horn in salute. The deaths of the fallen are a perfect juxtaposition to the birth of his son. A few months after Jordan is born, Charles gets to meet his son for the first time. Compared to Charles and Dana, Jordan is light-skinned, and that's because Charles's mom was probably white. Dana tells Charles that people do not believe that Jordan is her son and instead think she is his nanny, a silent nod to racism. Charles begins coughing and goes to get his inhaler. Being in Iraq, he has contracted asthma. He is in town for a few days and wants to marry her, but she doesn't want a rushed wedding and is willing to wait 6 weeks until he is done with his tour. The next morning, Charles is awake early and is bouncing Jordan, the two of them wearing matching army sweatshirts. He has an entire day planned for her and blindfolds her, taking the two of them to the park. He has set up a picnic for them to enjoy as a family. That's when the balloon photo was taken. They spend the day having a good time at leisure. A helicopter passes by, making Charles reach for his inhaler, indicating that his asthma might be related to PTSD. But he brushes it off, trying to be present in the limited time he has with his family. He has to leave again and hands her a book full of paintings. She flips through the book, not wanting one of the pictures. He hands her a bouquet of roses instead and kisses his little man, asking him to take care of Dana. Charles leaves for the last time. He says goodbye to Manny, asking him to take care of Dana as well. We come back to the present moment. Jordan and Dana are at Washington statue, and he asks her how Charles died. He wants the entire story and not just snippets. She begins to tell him the story. On October 14, 2006, Charles was running a mission to restock supplies at a remote location. On the way, an IED exploded and took out one vehicle. Charles managed to get himself out of the vehicle, but he was struck by shrapnel in his chest. He falls to the ground, desperately trying to remove a photograph from his pocket. One of his platoon mates drags him away, trying to save him. No matter how hard he tried, Charles took his last breath at 10:38 a.m., staring at the photograph of his wife and child, as life slowly drained from his eyes. There's no stopping those tears now. Dana's friends have just walked into her home when she gets the call. She is distraught, clinging to her friends for support as her heart breaks into a million pieces. She later finds out that Charles had planned for this to ensure she was not alone when she received this news. She finishes the story, and Jordan asks probably the most important question of the entire movie. He asks why they are even fighting that war. Dana explains that different people had different views about the war. Some say it was to free Iraq and stop terrorists. Others say that Americans created the by going to war. But his father had a different opinion. His father fought for his soldiers, to keep them alive and to get them home. Dana and Jordan are to visit Charles's grave, and Dana finds Jordan listening to his father's old tunes while working out. Charles stressed the importance of taking care of his body, and Jordan wanted to emulate that aspect of his father, becoming more and more like him each day. They reach the site to find that Jordan, with the help of his Aunt Miriam, has reached out to many of his father's soldiers, as well as family members, to join him. He reads a paragraph of what his father wrote for him in the journal. Family means everything to Jordan. It's why I wake up in the morning. It's why I put on my uniform and risk my life. And the great thing about it is that when you get older, you get to choose who's in it. So choose wisely. Surround yourself with people who love you for who you are, and love them back. Because love is the one thing in this world that is worth fighting for. Jordan could not understand why Dana was never given the flag, so he wanted to make sure that she did. He arranged for soldiers from his father's battalion to offer Dana the folded flag, symbolizing Charles's for their country. Dana hands the flag to Jordan, saying it rightfully belonged to him. The movie ends with Dana reciting the first page of her memoir as the group pays their respects to Charles. She goes on to tell Jordan how she felt like her life was over when she lost Charles, but instead, it was just beginning. She tells him to make his decisions through his heart, because the heart is a risky place. It can break, but it is better than leading your life numb because, without pain, it is impossible to find joy. She writes the memoir so Jordan always knows the remarkable love that Dana shared with Charles, a love she wishes Jordan would get to experience someday. The kind of love that does not ask her to be anyone other than who she is, and does not ask any more of you. She hopes he knows that he always has two parents watching over him. But she cannot hope to fill the role of a father in teaching this beautiful boy to become a young man. And for that, she gives him his father's journal and the wisdom it contains. By the time the credits roll, you feel like you've lived their lives. You've felt their joy and their sorrow. You've swooned at the romance and gotten hot and bothered at their chemistry. You've hoped for them and prayed that by some luck, Charles does not die. You are left feeling a catharsis of emotions. A perfect movie for a lonely night.
सब्सक्राइब करना भूलना मत जाने मन